He thought marrying his landlord was the strangest choice he'd ever make. But the real shock came later when he found her hidden diary and realized he didn't know the woman he had just vowed to spend his life with. The rain had been falling all evening, thin silver sheets sliding down the cracked windows of the old boarding house. Daniel sat at the edge of his narrow bed, fingers drumming against his thigh, staring at the thin wedding band on his hand. He was 22, a final-year literature student, and nothing in his life had prepared him for the decision he'd just made. He had married her, his landlord. Just a quick note, if you're new here and haven't subscribed, please take a moment to do so. Your support means the world and helps us share more heartfelt stories. Her name was Evelyn, 38, beautiful in a way that carried a quiet sadness. With long dark hair always pulled back in a braid and eyes that seemed to know too much. Their marriage hadn't been born of passion or reckless youth, it had been necessity, survival, maybe even fate. And now, in the quiet pulse of the storm outside, Daniel's chest tightened with the weight of it. He hadn't told anyone, not his friends, not his professors. The world would never understand. A student marrying his landlord. It sounded like a scandal waiting to explode. But Evelyn had smiled at him, soft and trembling, when they'd signed the papers at City Hall. She had taken his hand like she'd been waiting years for someone to reach out. "You'll be safe now," she'd whispered, voice breaking, as though danger lurked somewhere behind her. Safe from what? Daniel hadn't asked. Not then, now. In the heavy silence of her house, the house he suddenly belonged to, questions clawed at him. The rooms smelled faintly of lavender and old wood polish. Shadows moved in corners where the lamplight couldn't reach. Evelyn was downstairs, humming faintly as she made tea. Her hum carried a haunting tune, one Daniel couldn't place, as if it belonged to another century. He got up, restless, and drifted toward the hallway. His footsteps echoed against the warped floorboards, the air cool and tinged with something metallic. He told himself he was only exploring. But deep down he knew he was looking for answers. At the end of the corridor was a door, slightly ajar. The study. Evelyn had asked him not to go in there, not yet. But something in him pushed forward. Curiosity, maybe, or the unease of living with someone who had married him out of the blue. He pushed the door open with his fingertips. The study was dim, heavy curtains blocking most of the storm's light. Books lined the walls, leather-bound, cracked, smelling of dust and age. On the desk, papers lay stacked in neat, deliberate piles. But what caught his eye was the leather journal, half hidden beneath a folded shawl, a diary. His chest tightened. He should have turned back. He should have closed the door and walked away. Instead, Daniel reached for it. The leather was worn smooth, as though Evelyn's fingers had traced it 1,000 times. He sat at the desk, listening for her footsteps downstairs. Slowly he opened it. The handwriting was delicate, elegant, like ink sketches across the page. The first entry wasn't dated, but the words cut sharp. "If anyone finds this, it will be the end of me. My life isn't mine. My choices were never mine. And the man I loved is already gone." Daniel's throat went dry. He turned another page, faster this time. "He watches me even now. I can feel it in the walls. Every time I close my eyes, I hear his voice. I'm not free, not yet. Not until the contract is broken." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. Contract? Who was she writing about? The floor creaked. Evelyn's footsteps were on the stairs. He slammed the diary shut, heart hammering, and shoved it back beneath the shawl. The door opened behind him. Daniel. Her voice was calm, but something about the way she said his name sent a shiver down his back. He turned, forcing a smile. "I was just looking around." Her eyes lingered on the desk. For a heartbeat he thought she knew, that she'd seen. Then she smiled, soft and tired, and held out a steaming cup of tea. "This house can be overwhelming at first," she said. "It has memories." Daniel took the cup, fingers brushing hers. Her skin was cold, almost unnaturally so. "I'll get used to it," he said. Evelyn's gaze searched his face for a long moment, then shifted to the window where rain streaked the glass. "I hope so," she whispered. But when she turned to leave, Daniel saw the faintest tremor in her hand, and he knew, without a doubt, that Evelyn was hiding something far darker than he had ever imagined. That night, Daniel barely slept. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the silence inside the house pressed against his ears. Every creak of the old beams, every sigh of wind against the windows, felt amplified. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts circling the same image, Evelyn's trembling hand. He had only read a handful of lines from the diary, but they clung to him like thorns. "He watches me even now. Not until the contract is broken." What contract? Who was he? Daniel turned on his side and studied the outline of Evelyn through the thin veil of lamplight. She had insisted he stay in her room that night, though the bed was wide enough to keep a careful distance. She slept soundly, her braid loose across the pillow, lips parted slightly as she breathed. To anyone else, she would look peaceful, but Daniel saw something else, a woman carrying invisible chains, and he was now tied to her. Whether he understood it or not, when morning finally came, sunlight spilled reluctantly through the curtains, painting the room in pale gold. Evelyn rose early, slipping from the bed with a grace that seemed practiced, almost rehearsed. Daniel watched her from beneath the covers as she pulled on a long dress, buttoning it to her throat. "Do you always wake so early?" he asked, his voice rough from a night of sleeplessness. She paused, her back to him. "Habit," she said quietly. "It's harder to be found when you rise before others do." Daniel sat up, heart thumping. "Found by who?" Evelyn turned, and for a second he saw the shadow in her eyes before she masked it with a small smile. "Don't trouble yourself with my strange sayings. You'll learn I have plenty of them." She left the room before he could ask more. Downstairs, breakfast was already laid out: bread, fruit, and strong coffee that filled the air with its bitter warmth. Daniel joined her at the long wooden table, the same table he had eaten at countless times as her tenant, only now it felt different, intimate, dangerous. She poured coffee into his cup, her hand steady again, her face unreadable. "Daniel," she said, her voice low, "there are things about me you don't know, things I can't explain easily, but I need you to trust me. Marriage isn't always about love. Sometimes it's about protection." The words settled heavily between them. "Protection from what?" he pressed. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the window where morning mist still clung to the glass. "From the past, from promises I made long before you came here." Daniel gripped his cup tighter. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," she whispered. "Just stay. Don't leave this house without telling me. Promise me." The intensity in her gaze sent a shiver down his spine. "I promise," he said, though the word felt like a lie on his tongue. The next few days blurred into a strange rhythm. Daniel attended his classes, submitted his assignments, and returned each evening to the boarding house that was no longer just a rental. It was his home, though it never truly felt like his. Evelyn kept the house immaculate, moving through the halls like a ghost, always humming that same haunting melody. At night, she spoke little, and when she did, her words seemed measured, carefully chosen. Daniel tried to draw her out with questions about her childhood, her family, her life before the boarding house. She always deflected, smiling faintly, or changing the subject. The more she dodged, the more his curiosity festered. And always, in the back of his mind, the memory of the diary burned like an ember. One evening, after Evelyn had gone to bed early, Daniel found himself standing once again at the threshold of the study. His hand hovered over the doorknob, breath shallow. He had promised not to betray her trust, but hadn't she betrayed his, by hiding so much? He slipped inside. The air smelled of ink and old parchment. The desk sat where he'd left it, the shawl still draped casually over the diary. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring. Then, with trembling hands, he pulled the journal free. He opened to a random page. He said, "The walls would keep me safe, but I know better. The walls don't protect me. They trap me. Every board in this house remembers him. Every mirror whispers his name." Daniel swallowed hard. He turned another page. "The contract binds me still. My hand may sign for another. My lips may speak vows, but the shadow remains. Until death severs it, I will never be free." A sudden sound froze him. The creak of a stair. Daniel's heart leaped into his throat. He shoved the diary shut, stuffing it back into place, and spun toward the doorway. A figure stood in the hall, but it wasn't Evelyn. That was a man. Tall, gaunt, with eyes dark as coal and a smile that didn't reach them. His suit looked a century out of fashion, as though he had stepped out of an old photograph. Daniel's breath caught. The man raised a finger to his lips, silent, and then vanished. The hallway was empty. Daniel stumbled back, his pulse roaring in his ears. When Evelyn appeared moments later, holding a candle against the dark, she frowned at the sight of him. "Why are you awake?" she asked, her voice sharp. He tried to answer, but the words died in his throat, because how could he tell her what he had just seen without admitting that he had opened her hidden diary again? Daniel's throat tightened as Evelyn's candlelight flickered across her face. The shadows made her look older, wearier, like she was holding a weight he couldn't see. "I couldn't sleep," he managed, voice hoarse. "The storm." The floorboards creaked. Her eyes lingered on him for too long, suspicion glinting, before she turned and set the candle on the desk. The flame illuminated the edge of the shawl that hid the diary. Daniel held his breath, praying she wouldn't notice it had shifted. Evelyn brushed her fingers across the surface of the desk, as if searching for something only she knew was missing. Then she looked at him again, her tone gentler this time. "This house is full of noises. Don't let them frighten you." Daniel forced a nod, though his palms were clammy. The image of the man in the hallway still burned in his mind, the dark eyes, the impossible silence, the sudden vanishing. Evelyn blew out the candle and slipped her arm through his. "Come back to bed," she whispered. "The night makes liars of our eyes." But Daniel knew what he had seen. For days after, the house pressed in on him. He went through the motions of lectures and assignments, but his mind never left Evelyn's diary. The entries he had glimpsed replayed again and again. "The contract binds me still. Every mirror whispers his name." The man in the hallway wasn't a dream. Daniel felt it in his bones. He had stumbled into something far deeper than a strange marriage. And Evelyn, she was hiding from him, perhaps even protecting him. But from what? That night, he sat with her in the parlor, the fire low, the scent of smoke curling through the air. She sat opposite him, mending a tear in her sleeve with careful stitches. The lamplight softened her face, but her eyes seemed far away, like she was hearing voices only she could understand. Daniel set down his book. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "who lived here before me?" Her needle froze. "You've rented this house for years," he pressed. "There must have been others. Tenants before me." She lifted her gaze, and he saw the flicker of dread before she masked it. "You asked too many questions." "I saw someone," he blurted. Her needle slipped, pricking her finger. A bead of blood bloomed at her skin. She didn't flinch, didn't even glance down. Her eyes locked on him. "What did you see?" Daniel hesitated. "A man, tall, in the hallway. Disappeared." Her lips parted, but no words came. She set the fabric aside, hands trembling. "You shouldn't have seen him," she whispered. "Who is he?" Her silence stretched long, broken only by the fire's crackle. Then, finally, she spoke. "My husband." Daniel blinked. He died years ago." Her voice was flat, almost brittle. "But the dead don't always stay where they're buried." The words struck him like ice. "You mean, this house?" "Don't say it." Her voice cut sharp. "Walls, remember. That's all you need to know." But Daniel wasn't satisfied. "Why didn't you tell me before? Why marry me at all?" Her expression softened, but sorrow dimmed her features. "Because you were kind. Because you reminded me of what it felt like to be seen not as a widow, not as a woman tied to a curse, but as someone worth trusting. I thought, maybe you would break it." Daniel leaned forward. "The contract. That's what your diary meant, isn't it?" Evelyn stiffened, realization flashing in her eyes. "You read it." The room fell into a heavy silence. Daniel's chest ached with guilt, but he didn't back down. "Yes, I read it, and I need to know the truth." Her shoulders slumped. She looked at the fire as though it held the answers. "He wasn't always like that," she said softly. "When I met him, he was charming, magnetic. He promised me a future, wealth, protection. I was young, foolish. I signed the contract without understanding. A vow written in more than ink. A vow that chained me to him." Daniel's skin prickled. "What kind of contract?" Her eyes glistened. "One that death should have broken, but it didn't. He lingers, and as long as he lingers, I belong to him, no matter who I marry." Daniel's pulse quickened. "So why marry me?" Her voice trembled now. "Because if the vows I made with him were chains, then maybe vows spoken freely, with someone good, could break them." She looked at him then, her face naked with desperation. "I hoped you'd be strong enough, that together we could silence him." The fire popped, sparks scattering. Daniel stared into her eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. He had thought this marriage was strange, maybe even reckless, but now it was clear. Evelyn wasn't just lonely, she was trapped. And by marrying her, he had stepped into the prison too. That night, Daniel dreamed of the man. He stood at the foot of their bed, suit pressed, hands folded neatly in front of him. His eyes glowed faintly, like embers beneath ash. "You think you can take what's mine?" the man murmured, his voice a low hiss. "You think vows can free her?" Daniel tried to speak, but his mouth wouldn't open. The man leaned closer, his face inches from Daniel's. The smell of earth and decay clung to him. "She is bound, and now you are too." Daniel jolted awake, gasping. The room was dark, Evelyn sleeping peacefully beside him, but the echo of the man's words lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. The following morning, Daniel couldn't stay silent. He found Evelyn in the garden, kneeling among the roses, her hands dirt-stained as she pruned the stems. The autumn air was sharp, the sky gray. "I saw him again," Daniel said, his voice shaking. Evelyn froze, clippers in hand. Slowly, she rose to her feet. "Then it's begun," she whispered. "What's begun?" Her eyes filled with fear, and she gripped his arm with surprising strength. "He knows you're here. He knows you've bound yourself to me. He'll fight you for me, Daniel, and he won't stop until one of us is gone." Daniel's breath caught. The roses around them swayed in the wind, their thorns sharp as teeth. And for the first time since stepping into Evelyn's house, Daniel understood. He hadn't just married a woman, he had married her curse. The days that followed were no longer normal. Daniel could feel the man everywhere, in the walls, in the mirrors, in the way Evelyn would glance behind her shoulder when she thought he wasn't looking. The house, once just old and creaking, seemed alive now. Whispers rose in the night. Windows rattled even when the wind was still. Doors opened on their own. Evelyn moved through it with quiet resignation, as if she had long grown used to it. But Daniel hadn't. Every sound clawed at his nerves. Every flicker of shadow twisted his stomach. One night, after a long silence at dinner, Daniel finally snapped. "This can't go on," he said, voice trembling with anger and fear. "We can't just sit here pretending this is normal." Evelyn set down her fork. Her face was pale in the candlelight, her eyes tired. "What choice do we have?" "There has to be a way," Daniel pressed. "The diary said something about a contract. What is it? Where is it?" Her hand flinched against the table. She didn't answer. "Evelyn," he urged, softer now. "If I'm part of this, if I'm bound, like you say, then I deserve to know." She swallowed hard. "It's hidden. He made me write it, sign it, seal it with blood. It's not paper you can burn. It's part of this house now. Every beam, every nail holds a piece of it." Daniel's breath hitched. Then how do we break it? Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. Only by facing him. But no one who tried has ever lived. That night, Daniel stood at the mirror in their room, staring at his reflection. His face looked thinner, shadows beneath his eyes deeper. He touched the glass hand for a heartbeat. His reflection didn't move with him, it smiled. Daniel staggered back. The reflection's lips moved, though the glass made no sound. But he didn't need to hear the words to know what they were. She's mine. The mirror cracked down the center with a sharp snap. Evelyn rushed in at his cry, her braid half undone, her face stricken. What happened? She demanded. He pointed to the glass. Trembling. He was there, in me. He's trying to take her before he could finish. The cracked mirror shattered into pieces, raining down onto the floor. Evelyn grabbed his hands, her voice firm. Listen to me. He's growing stronger because you're here. Your vows to me, they challenged him. He won't let go until he's destroyed you. Daniel's chest heaved. Then we fight him. Her eyes widened in horror. No, if you fight, you'll lose. I don't care, Daniel said, voice raw. I can't live like this, and I won't let you stay chained to him. Evelyn's lips parted, her breath trembling. For the first time, something like hope flickered in her expression. They prepared in silence. Evelyn lit every candle in the house, their flames pushing back the shadows. Daniel brought the diary from the study and laid it on the parlor table. The leather cover seemed to pulse faintly under the light, as if alive. This is the key, Evelyn said, her fingers brushing the cover. But it can't be destroyed until he's summoned. Daniel swallowed. Then summon him. She hesitated, fear quivering in her body. Then she opened the diary, turning to a page filled with lines not in her hand, jagged black letters that seemed to crawl across the page. She began to read aloud. The air in the room thickened, cold pouring in through unseen cracks. The candles flickered wildly. The walls groaned as though the house itself was in pain. And then he appeared. The man from the hallway. Taller now, more solid, his eyes burning with cruel delight. He stepped forward, his voice a low echo. Evelyn. Evelyn's body stiffened, but she didn't look away. You don't own me. His smile twisted. Don't I? You signed, you vowed, you bled. Until your last breath, you are mine. His gaze shifted to Daniel, sneering. And now this boy thinks he can claim you. Pitiful. Daniel stepped forward, fists clenched, though his legs shook. She's not yours anymore. The man's laugh filled the room, deep and hollow. You think vows spoken in desperation matter. You think love can undo what blood sealed. Daniel's voice broke, but he stood firm. Yes, because hers with you were born of fear. Mine were not. For the first time, the man's smile faltered. The flames dimmed. Evelyn seized the moment, slamming her hand onto the diary. Break it, she cried. The man lunged, but Daniel grabbed the book, the leather burning against his palms. He shouted, Rip the page. Evelyn screamed. Daniel tore at the jagged black script. The paper resisted, stretching instead of tearing, as if alive. The man shrieked, his form trembling. You can't, he roared. She is mine, not anymore. Daniel spat, pulling with all his strength. The page finally ripped, the sound sharp as thunder. The candles exploded, plunging the room into darkness. When Daniel's eyes adjusted, he was on the floor, chest heaving. Evelyn knelt beside him, her hands clutching his. The diary lay open nearby, its pages blank. The ink vanished. The man was gone. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. She pressed her forehead against his. You did it, she whispered. You freed me. Daniel shook, half in disbelief, half in exhaustion. Is it over? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Her gaze swept the room, the shattered glass, the dying embers of the fire. Then, finally, she nodded. Yes, he's gone. Relief crashed over him like a wave. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as tightly as if she might vanish. But deep inside, a sliver of doubt lingered. The diary was blank. Yes, but the walls of the house still seemed to hum, faint and low, like a memory refusing to die. Morning light crept into the parlor slowly, hesitant after the night of chaos. The candles had burned to stubs, wax hardened on the wooden table. The diary lay where it had fallen open, lifeless, its pages empty like a gutted shell. Daniel sat slumped in a chair, exhaustion pressing down on him like stone. Every muscle ached, every breath felt heavy. Evelyn stood near the window, her braid loose, her silhouette pale against the gray dawn. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Daniel found his voice. It's really gone. The contract. Evelyn turned, her eyes soft but shadowed. The diary is empty. His words are erased. That should mean freedom. She gave a small, broken smile. When you live bound to someone, Evan, in death, certainty doesn't come easily. Daniel pushed himself upright, crossing the room to her. He touched her hand, still cold, though not as icy as before. Then let me give you certainty. You're not alone anymore. Whatever's left of him, whatever whispers this house holds, we face it together. Her lips trembled. For the first time since he had known her, tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She leaned into him, burying her face against his chest. I never thought anyone would stay, she whispered. Everyone always left. Or worse. Daniel tightened his arms around her. I'm not leaving. In the days that followed, the house changed. The mirrors stopped whispering. The air grew lighter, no longer thick with that unseen weight. For the first time in years, Evelyn opened the curtains wide and let sunlight pour into the rooms. She moved differently, her steps less cautious, her voice no longer hushed. Even her hum changed. The haunting tune that once curled through the halls was replaced with soft, gentle melodies. Daniel noticed it all, and with each small change, his relief deepened. But some things lingered at night. He sometimes woke to the faintest sound of footsteps in the hallway, measured, deliberate. When he sat up, the hall was empty, and Evelyn slept beside him undisturbed. Once, while studying in the parlor, he caught sight of movement in the corner of his shadow slipping across the wall. When he turned, there was nothing there. He didn't tell Evelyn. He didn't want to shatter the fragile peace she was building. One evening, weeks later, Daniel found her in the garden kneeling among the roses again. The thorns had scratched her hands, but she didn't seem to notice. She was smiling faintly, watching the petals tremble in the autumn wind. "You look different," he said, crouching beside her. She glanced at him, amusement softening her face. "Older, no lighter, like the house isn't crushing you anymore." Her eyes shone, and for a moment he saw the woman she could have been all along, free, unburdened. "That's because of you," she whispered. Nell brushed dirt from her cheek. "No, that's because you chose to fight. I just held on with you." She touched his hand, and for the first time her fingers were warm. That night they shared wine by the fire. The mood was tender, unguarded, like the storm had finally passed. Evelyn leaned against him, the glow of the flames catching in her eyes. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Marrying me, walking into this madness?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He thought of the first night he'd opened the diary, the terror of seeing that figure in the hall, the dream where the dead husband hissed in his ear. He thought of how close he had come to giving in to fear, and then he looked at Evelyn alive, free hers again, and shook his head. "No, I don't regret it. Not for a second." Her shoulders eased, and she kissed his cheek, lingering as if afraid to let go. "Then maybe we both have a chance," she whispered later. When the fire had died down and the house was quiet, Daniel wandered into the study. He hadn't stepped into the room since the night of the confrontation. The desk was bare now. The diary still sat there, but its pages remained empty. He flipped through them, half expecting words to rise again. But there was nothing as he closed the book. A chill drifted over his skin. He looked up. In the reflection of the darkened window, he saw them himself, standing tall, the diary in hand, and behind him, a figure. The man. Just for a moment, the reflection smiled that hollow smile. Then it was gone. Daniel stood frozen, the diary heavy in his hands. He carried it back to the parlor and laid it in the fire. Flames licked at the leather, smoke curling into the chimney. The book resisted at first, the cover darkening but not catching. Daniel pushed it deeper into the embers until finally it burned, curling into ash. When it was done, he exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from his chest. Evelyn appeared at the doorway, wrapped in a shawl. "What did you do?" Daniel turned to her, stood smudging his hands. "Finished it. For good this time." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded, her shoulders lowering with relief. He crossed the room, took her hand, and led her upstairs. The house groaned as they climbed, but it sounded different now, not threatening, just old wood settling into silence. In their room, Evelyn lay beside him, her breathing steady. Daniel stared at the ceiling, waiting for whispers, for shadows, for footsteps, but the house was quiet. Finally, his eyes closed, and though doubt lingered in the farthest corners of his mind, he allowed himself for the first time in weeks to believe in peace. If this story gripped you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more tales that keep you on the edge of your seat. Share it with someone who loves a good mystery. You never know what secrets they'll uncover.